Welcome to the Cardboard Crash Course. My name's Ethan, and this is Adam and Armand, and we're here to talk about some new ideas we have for strategy cards in Twilight Imperium. Strategy cards are the cards that you pick at the beginning of the strategy phase. These are the cards that basically determine your entire strategy for the round. I already talked about this in the previous video where I talked about my expansion wish list, which you can find in a card right on the top right there. And if you watch that video, I talk about how I'd love to see in an expansion a couple new strategy cards of different types. So I think we've all come up with a couple of different interesting ideas for strategy cards that could be homebrewed into our games. So we each came up with 2 cards. That's 6 cards total, and we have not seen each other's, which I'm really excited about. We've come up with names for them, abilities for them, including primary and secondary abilities, as well as where they should fit into the lineup. I think you had one that you don't exactly know, but we'll talk about it when we get there. I want to start with talking about the possibility of having new strategy cards in this game. Wanted to ask these two, new strategy cards and options would even be necessary or fun? Or do you think that the 8 we have now completely covers everything in the game?
I definitely don't think that the 8 covers everything in the game. I think it is a very good selection of 8. I think the game designers did a really good job of kind of gauging both the strength of the cards as well as the function to work for the game in lower player counts, maybe like, 4 to 6, or even with 8 players, maybe everything does not feel as strong as everything else in certain situations. And
playing in an 8-player game and being the right to the speaker really sucks because you always end up with diplomacy.
Hey, you know what? I will say this though, sometimes diplomacy turn 1, kind of the move. Not gonna lie, you can ready some planets, and that can be super helpful.
If you're like the barony or a faction that comes with multiple home systems even.
To be stuck with an option
in almost every situation that I end up with diplomacy first round, I'd still rather have trade. But there are specific situations.
Which is honestly why I really liked when you even brought this whole thing up to us. You showed us the number 9, we saw it in the video. I was like, wait, that's really cool. And you get the option to do something if you're that last player, if you're playing an 8-player game, where maybe you're kind of left with options you don't like, and next thing you know, you're like, well, I can at least do this. And that helps you, and in this particular situation, it helps you look at objectives further to maybe figure out and plan a few rounds ahead to get what you want, since this round you're kind of taking it off a little bit.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think without further ado, would you like to start with your first one? Tell us the name, number, and what the abilities are.
I will. All right. So, my first strategy card is Acceleration.
Oh.
I put this around 6 to 7. It is arguably very similar to the Warfare card, which I very much enjoy, but I noticed that there is no way to move ships other than the tactical action. So I thought, what if there's a strategy card for it? Your primary ability. Move up to 3 non-fighter ships from a system without your command token to an adjacent system. If there are other players' units or planets on that system, it is treated as if it has been activated. Proceed with the action as if it was a tactical action, starting with space combat.
Interesting.
Okay. So it's kind of Warfare, but it's only for movement.
Yes.
So essentially it's worth a command counter and also half of a Warfare ability at the same time?
Correct.
Okay. What's the secondary?
The secondary ability is to spend 1 token from your strategy pool to move up to... Now, this was a number I wasn't sure of, but 2 non-fighter ships from a system without your command token to an adjacent system. So, not only does it accelerate the person who chooses the card, it accelerates everybody at the table if they choose to do it.
And I don't mean to butt in, but my instant thought there is, how does that work? Because maybe you start other space combats at the same time?
I believe you'd have to do it in order.
Okay,
so
that would be the idea.
Uses the card.
Speaker order?
Yes.
Oh, okay. Okay, right. And then resolve all the space combats?
Mm-hmm.
That would be very interesting.
I feel like...
And that is only if people end up using it. And I guess it technically doesn't accelerate your opponents, since they do have to use a strategy token, or command token from the strategy pool.
But it doesn't get placed in the system.
Yes, it does not get placed in the system.
Okay. I feel like the difference, so I like it because I do think that accelerating the game is a good thing, and starting space combats more often is a good thing. The only thing that I think right away is that there's the difference between the primary and the secondary, I don't feel like is large enough.
I was going to do 1 instead of 2, but then that almost felt like not enough. I don't know.
I almost think you should just keep the secondary where it is, but boost the primary.
Okay, sure.
Do you think it would be too much to make the secondary moving ships into a system that just have yours, to maybe just move a couple guys around?
Or into an empty system?
Yeah, something like that. So to maybe reduce the headache of maybe, because that card could be played every round,
like an
constant
empty,
fighting.
Right, like an empty system, or like a system that has unclaimed planets. But the only player who actually gets to resolve space combats is the player who played the
primary
card.
player?
I guess there are space combats out of turn because of the benediction ability from the Mahak's hero.
True.
Where you can force somebody else into a combat out of their turn. So there is kind of precedence for it.
I mostly added that stipulation so it couldn't be abused for public objectives or positioning objectives. Because I had thought if you could just go, hey, I'm going to move these to an adjacent, and it doesn't start a space combat, then you can kind of just set up next to a system, and then at the end of the round use it and be on the specific system that you want for your objective.
Right.
And I almost felt that was slightly too powerful.
Okay.
And
I mean, that does seem very powerful. I mean, I think between 6 and 7-ish probably sounds about right for something like that. Because now that Ethan had mentioned it, that does kind of sound like the Mahak's like hero, but like a mini version of it, and everyone gets the option to kind of move. But it is very intriguing.
If we're breaking the strategy cards down by worth with each other, and we take leadership as the base for that, a strategy card is inherently at least worth 3 command counters. Like if you're taking warfare, you're getting the token back. You're removing it from the system and getting the token back onto your sheet, and then being able to redistribute stuff. So that's kind of like 1 command counter. The only thing, like, I'm just trying to think.
Well, the secondaries always give you the option to usually spend 1 command counter, and the primary is giving you usually that boosted up a little bit, so maybe at least somewhat two worth. I mean, in the instance, obviously, of leadership, you can dump a bunch of influence in it, but that's an extra resource you are spending.
yeah, I think leadership is slightly an outlier in terms of how many command tokens it is worth, since it literally gives you command tokens.
Yeah.
It's interesting to kind of just have like a separate, different warfare for positioning specifically.
I agree.
I feel like it would get picked more often than warfare for command counter rich factions, and less often than warfare for factions starved of command counters, because you don't actually get it back.
You don't get it back, but it is never used. And it was also a stipulation I added that the ships must be moved from a system without your command token already, so you can't move somewhere with the tactical action, then move those ships again with acceleration, and then move them again with the tactical action.
I like how it moves the game forward.
And there's different implications. Obviously, warfare, you have the advantage of being able to move everything more than just one space. So there's a little more setup, but it is a bit slower because you have to take the token off unless you have, is it fleet logistics that allows you to move twice in a turn?
Yeah, take 2 actions.
So yeah, it depends. I think there's positives and negatives to both, but obviously playtesting is the only way to really see which one's going to be more powerful and which factions are going to be.
It's almost like a warfare, it's like 6.5.
It is a little bit, and that's kind of how I thought about it.
I mean, if you really wanted to like elevate the game, you could almost have alternatives for each of them that do something slightly different, just to give a little more flavor. But
so there was that in 3rd edition. So that was that's why I'm like trying to think of it as kind of like a warfare variant.
Yep.
Because in the Shard of the Throne expansion for Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, there was 3 strategy cards, and I forget which ones they were for, but they were variant strategy cards where you could mix any of them in instead of like the ones that were already there. So like you could remove Warfare and you could put in Warfare Omega or whatever it was.
That's cool.
Instead, and it was like it would change the game slightly. I know one of them was Imperial because in Twilight Imperium 3rd Edition, Imperial just straight up gave you 2 points for using it.
Oh, wow.
And they had like that's too much, so they switched it around. I like it. I think it should get some play testing and
I agree.
and see how it actually affects the objectives.
Yeah, no, I mean, I overall agree. I think it's nice to have more options in terms of movement.
All right, I actually wrote mine down. Espionage. It's a number 6, so this is saying that I would put it at 6 and then move Warfare up to 7, have Imperial at 9, and it would fit in that slot after trade before Warfare. The primary ability of Espionage. Choose up to 2 systems that each contain a planet you control. Explore each planet in each of those systems in any order. Then ready each of your agents. So that is both Nomad's multiple agents as well as if you got JR, the relic agent, that's where it would matter, where it's ready each of them. So basically you get to explore 2 full systems and then ready your agents. The secondary, spend 1 token from your strategy pool to explore 1 planet you control or ready 1 of your agents, which most people it would just be the 1. Mm-hmm. The reason why I put it after trade is because if you're over-exploring planets, you're going to want the commodities that come from trade. So you would want to be able to use the secondary of trade. Like if you're stalling this card out and you're trying to like maximize your ability to explore these planets, you're going to want to have used the secondary of trade or gotten some kind of replenish from trade to have some trade, like to have some commodities already in order to spend on those explorations.
Right.
But I wanted to put it before Warfare. In a pinch, I want it to be a little bit difficult of a choice to be like, I have to wait for this because I have to wait for Warfare so that I can get to exactly where I need. And as far as readying the agents, so it was kind of like 2 separate little things where I was like, I want an exploration card and I want a agent. I want like a leader card.
Yep.
Kind of mash.
But I didn't think either one of those were strong enough, so I kind of just like put like half and half, like Frankenstein them together.
Sure.
Kind of like how politics is like 3 separate things Frankenstein together.
It's funny you say that because I may or may not have one that has something to do with exploring planets too. Well, we can get onto that next and segue into it, but we'll obviously focus more on yours at the moment. I think adding the ability with the agent and doing the planets, because in my head I'm like, I love that about the Prophecy of Kings expansion. Exploring planets. It's such an awesome new mechanic that adds a lot more depth to it. And it just gives you more resources and more things to pull. It's just exciting. So it's a little unfortunate that there were no new cards to go alongside the expansion. So you can't really take advantage of that. So I really do like the idea of doing that, and then also adding on the agent. That makes it a bit more powerful because some agents are stronger than others.
Some are worth stalls too. So I figured if you're the Nomad or the Nazroka, I'm not really balancing this card around you. You do just get more value, but
the scan link drones, were those also added in Prophecy of Kings
Yes.
then? Okay, that makes sense because those obviously also allow you to re-explore planets.
And I did not want to just make this a better version of that. That's why I was like, you can choose 2 different systems. The max you're going to get out of this, because home systems don't have planet traits, the max you're going to possibly get is 5 explorations and 3 agent refreshes if you're the Nomad.
That still seems really good though.
It's but that is like min-maxing like the perfect Christmas land scenario. Most of the time you're going to end up with 2 to 4 explorations and 1 agent refresh.
Oh, sure, because through 3 or 4 or 3 or 2 planet systems. Okay, sure, yeah.
And you said for the secondary again, you can spend 1 command token from your strat pool to either do the agent or 1 planet or 1 system.
Agent or 1 planet.
1 planet in particular. Got it.
Okay, so a couple of issues that come up with this. You're going to have to absolutely follow speaker order when resolving the secondary.
Sure.
In the same way that drawing action cards would matter. Even more so with exploration because it can affect other people.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you're going to be the one to pull the relic fragments or whatever, and then it'll have to follow like exactly. It can't just be like...
But that still works within the bounds of the game rules, right? Just
Yes.
taking turn order for stuff.
The other issue that comes up is that when you're re-exploring so often, and this is why I had to turn down the secondary to only be one planet, the deck gets really, really small.
Right.
And if you're exploring 5 times towards the end of the game, you might see the same card multiple times in one use of this strategy card.
That's actually very fair. Because I've seen Nazroka go pretty crazy and eat through the deck themselves.
So I actually said that the best case scenario is exploring 5 planets. But keep in mind, if you're the Nazroka, the best case scenario, you're seeing 10 cards.
That is a lot, and you know what? Thinking about the one that I worked on as well, I'm starting to realize that is a big downfall to that. Maybe you just add some extra cards in to go alongside it. I don't know.
But there are just factions like Jolnar just like technology.
Oh, and
Hakan just like the trade card.
Sure, yeah.
So I feel like Nazroka and the Nomad could just like Espionage.
And you know what? There's not obviously you're going to start running out of attachments and stuff because those will be already allocated to planets. But then you'll start going through and getting the ones that people really like to do, which are usually just good value engines, right? Take a dude off your planet, get 2 trade goods or whatever.
So technically, Magic Christmas Land scenario, best case scenario, you're getting 5 relic fragments. You're able to get a relic, which sometimes is worth a point. So it's kind of like the best scenario, you might have a chance to roll into a point from Shard of the Throne that could be taken away. Or the Obsidian, I believe, that could draw you an extra secret objective. So I wanted this to be kind of like a low floor but high ceiling card.
I mean, I think relic fragments and turning that all into a relic, I mean, that they're always worth something, right? Like maybe they're not actually worth a physical point, but they're helping you enough to probably get you a point for sure.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The more we discuss it, the more I almost want to put it higher for that high ceiling in the lineup.
Oh, like 7 or 8 range maybe?
Like in between Technology and Imperial?
Because technology can get you a lot of really important things as well. But
this is also a card that if you use really early, will screw over your opponents if they, if you plan for it and they don't have an agent to refresh.
Exactly, yeah.
This is kind of like diplomacy in that way, where it's like if you use it really early, nobody has anything to use the secondary to refresh with.
It's a big resource card, so I can totally see it needing to be much later. Because I start to think of tech, right? You can get ScanLink, and that is essentially yes, you're allowed to use that to re-explore planets, which is what you're doing on this card. So it's if you're spending a whole card to get ScanLink, you could also just get a card that does ScanLink. Obviously, if you don't want to research ScanLink, there's plenty of other things that allow you to do things that you wouldn't normally do with tech. But yeah, I think maybe even up to 7 could be reasonable. Or
I would say if 7 pushing tech to 8. Just because, yes, you can get ScanLink with tech, but then there's so much other stuff you can get. It is more versatile.
I would just be excited to have an exploration card.
I would be too, and that is why I also had something very similar. So I called mine Aggressive Mining. So I put this at number 5, and maybe I don't have as good of an explanation on why I put it there as you, Ethan, but let me just go through it, because it is slightly different, and I think it actually tackles something differently, because you focused on the agent. And in my head, I was like, well, what do you explore other than planets? Well, primary. Re-explore any 2 planets you control or a tile with no planets in it as if it had a frontier token on it. So in a lot of instances, I found myself liking frontier tokens. You can obviously explore those if you get, what's the name of that one?
Dark Energy Tap.
Dark Energy Tap. But that's also a big deck, and then once the board gets cleaned up of those, unless you're playing the Empyrean and they reflip all of them and put them back on, not a lot of ways to get at that. So I thought that would be interesting.
What if the tile already has a frontier token on it? Do you just Dark Energy Tap?
I guess you could maybe the wording could be updated to you put one on. So maybe you could put one on and there could be 2, and then you just have to re-explore.
Interesting.
Okay. But yeah, and then secondary, This is variable, and this could be either OP or not worth it. Pay 2 influence to re-explore a planet up to 2 times. So anyone can pay 2 influence. It kind of like leadership, so you can do it multiple times, but here it's capped to 2 planets. I just, again, liked the idea. So the primary gives you the ability to redo frontier tokens. So that's kind of the benefit of being able to do the primary as well. So no one in the secondary has the option to do that.
Mm-hmm. And the cards from the frontier tokens are usually stronger. And, I mean, it could be Mirage, Mirage, right? No.
In the Frontier deck?
Yeah.
Mirage.
Yeah. So you get stuff like that.
But and then it's like 5, I was like, it's middle, it's nothing crazy, but it's also not like, it's not worth being over here at 8, but I also think there's enough value to it to where it's not like a 2 or 3. So I kind of just like 5.
I think it's called Derelict Vessel. That in the Frontier deck, it is one of the best cards. It allows you to draw 1 secret objective. Would be like your best case scenario, like draw or gain a command counter and 3 trade goods.
I mean, there could be some variation too. Maybe it's updated so you can do a planet and an empty space. Because in the wording I have either 2 planets or an empty space. Kind of going back onto how much each card is worth. You think, okay, well, maybe I just get 1 frontier token off of my card. And then what? I mean, is that really worth a command counter every time? Drawing something from the deck, maybe it's a little weak.
So you're going to want at least Dark Energy taps worth of value out of choosing a different card over technology. But not actually getting DET for later in the game.
I didn't want to overtune it.
Well, you get a Gamma Wormhole from the Frontier token, and you get 2 commodities out of your
You spent your whole turn just getting a Gamma Wormhole on the board.
So both, no matter what it is, if it has to do with exploration, it's going to be random.
True, yeah.
So
kind of goes into that, like, it could be really good, it could be really but you're taking a gamble. So then mine is a little lower than yours as well. Yours was higher, but I mean, looking at yours compared to mine, you're talking 2 whole systems. You could have 3 planets in a system.
Right.
So I only said like 2 planets. So I think maybe mixing them together to get 2 planets and then maybe an empty space as well, or being able to pay a little more, kind of making it like leadership, where you can also pay additional influence to re-explore more planets or something along those lines. But I think we both had the same idea of it's fun to explore planets, and I think that would be something cool on one of these cards, is just as a different option. And I like my name because it's cool. You can mine asteroids and aggressively mine the the planets for more resources.
Yeah.
For the secondary ability, you said it is capped to 2. Is that 2... So can I explore the same planet twice? Is that something that you would take into account? Or does it have to be separate planets?
I don't see a reason why you wouldn't be able to do the same planet.
Okay. What happens if there are 2 modifier cards you get for a single planet?
I think they say something, right? If it's already modified?
Oh, I believe it does.
It says, so the attachments, they do something different whether there's already a technology specialty or not. Sure. And they always give you a technology specialty if it doesn't already have one for everything out of the industrial deck, I think. If one already gave you a technology specialty where there wasn't already one, and then another one came up that checked for it, it would do the other thing. But you can have multiple on the same planet.
Interesting. Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say that might be a downside if someone does end up choosing it early, and maybe someone only has...
They're just going to DMZ themselves.
Yeah. That would suck.
It does suck. It really needed it to be something else, and it was the DMZ.
Quickly, before we move into the last 3 strategy cards we have to talk about, I want to talk about today's sponsor, the Cardboard Crash Course Patreon. That's right, we're sponsoring ourselves. If you want to throw in a couple of bucks or even up to the higher Cardboard Crash Course Professor tier, we'd absolutely appreciate it. Now, don't leave anything if you don't absolutely have the ability to do so, but every couple of dollars helps, and helps us do things like have these nice new microphones that allow us to all talk to each other without hearing crazy spatial audio. So, if you want to head over to the Cardboard Crash Course Patreon, the link will either be in the card up on the top right of the screen or in the description down below. To all the patrons who have joined since the last video, I really, really appreciate it. Thank you very much for giving to the Cardboard Crash Course. Let's get into the second half of the video. So, you have another strategy card to talk about?
I sure do. And it is somewhat similar to your first strategy card, at least in the name. But this one I kind of had two ideas for. So I'm going to share the one that is least similar to yours.
Okay.
This one is called Sabotage. And it is kind of mean. I think it is going to be somewhere in the 2 to 3 range of the strategy cards, just because I don't really think it gets the player who uses it anything, but it sure as hell can make another player's life a little bit worse. So, the primary ability, ready one agent. Now, stipulation on this, it doesn't have to be your agent. You can ready any one agent. Then, choose up to 2 players. Those players must exhaust one of their agents.
So, the reason why it's in the lower is because you don't want to give more than 1 or 2 people the ability to use their agents to get around you.
Correct. Plus, it doesn't get you a whole lot. You're not gaining a whole lot of resources from this. The secondary ability is a stopgap. Spend 1 token from your strategy pool to ready 1 agent.
Okay, that was literally my immediate thought was, will the secondary just be, well, I got screwed over, I might as well, now I have to spend a resource just to get what I wanted back.
Yes.
Okay.
Either case scenario, you are taking resources away from somebody who might be in the lead and might have needed either their agent or one of their tokens to win the game.
So, right away, this game can be mean, and there are situations that you can rip people's resources away from them. You can take people's planets. You can. There are laws that will reset people's command counters, so to actually remove ability to do things. We've never had an ability that turns off faction abilities.
Right.
I appreciate that it's not exhaust everybody's, because I do like seeing people's agents. Keep in mind that you are playing these agents sometimes for other people's benefits and
Right.
not for yourself.
And in response to other things. And that's why the secondary ability is also ready 1 agent. So if someone else at the table wants to, they can spend their command token for this to ready a player who is screwed over's agent.
I really, really like the flavor of that, where it's one player kind of becomes the villain for the round, and then other players have to kind of work together to get around it.
Mm-hmm. And maybe in this case, in some cases, they're not the villain, but they're helping take down someone who got ahead way too early.
Right.
And it is up to 2. You do not have to choose 2 players. You can choose just 1 and be like, I'm going to exhaust your agent. If you want it, pay me a command token. Or not me, but, pay 1.
I mean, it is very mean. And maybe those are just our personal games, because we're friends, we always don't want to be too mean. That one's just straight out, just, okay, no. And it's oh, that's so annoying. And I can't tell if it's a positive or a negative. Obviously, it sounds negative. I kind of do really like the idea, though. It's it really shakes things up. Now, I'm not being a hypocrite. I know I really don't like that one law that has everyone not be able to take the thing that they want.
Checks and balances.
Yeah, I hate that. This kind of sounds like that, but I guess in my head, I just keep thinking, is this even powerful enough?
I think it should be choose 2 players, exhaust their agents, maybe not rip resources away from them, but take away something they've gained. Do we really want to be decelerating people? Because this game already lasts all day.
That is true. That is true.
Do you really want to take away, I don't like when that law comes up that resets everybody's boards to 332 command counters.
Yeah.
It's because if somebody's about to win, sometimes I'm happy the day's going to be over. And when they get reset and they're not able to complete whatever public objective already came up, I'm all right. Well, I mean, I'm glad I'm back in the running, but we got to sit here for another 3 hours.
I completely understand that. I also kind of wanted a little bit more direct interaction with just a lot of these, the only interaction is, hey, everyone else can do the secondary ability. Trade is a little bit different, and I kind of took it from Trade where it's hey, you can choose any number of players, and give them resources? What if you could choose players and take them away?
Right. But you don't just want to make it an anti-trade.
This kind of comes back to, do you want to see that potentially every round of the game? Again, it can slow it down a little bit. Most of these effects that really like punish people, because most factions focus on themselves. Obviously, if we're talking about combat, you're maybe buffing yourself, debuffing your opponent. There's not a lot of stuff that's interaction, and I get that. It is fun to have interaction, but maybe we just play too much Magic and there's so much interaction that we're kind of letting that bleed into other games, because not every game has to be super interaction heavy, although I do like the idea. I think it is fun when there's a lot more going on.
So I like the idea too. You said, do you really want to see this every round? And I say no. Because if you're the person in first, if you're doing really well, you're going to keep having your ability to play your faction turned off. And like, we are experienced players. We have felt what it feels like to use the Arborec agent. But a new player just trying to play with the pieces in front of him, if he's doing well, he's going to keep getting those fun pieces taken away from him. But taking away an agent is not enough to make him not still in first.
Exactly.
So he's just going to keep getting his toys taken away every round, which is a little bit scary about this. I almost feel like if you're going to have a card that hurts somebody, you have to hurt them. You can't just like poke at them. You've got to hurt them so much that they no longer are the threat, so that the next time the card comes around, it targets somebody else.
Right. Okay.
You see what I'm
I
saying?
understand that criticism. If we were to buff it, where do we think we'd put it in the lineup? Because I think
still early on. It's
still early
good.
on, because you still need it early to stop them from doing the thing on their turn.
Right. I don't know what kind of buffs would I almost feel like we should leave it to the audience.
Yeah.
If you had a strategy card that instead of helping yourself hurt somebody else or the rest of the table, what would that look like? Because I think that's the only one of the 6 we have today that's going to be like that.
Yeah, mine has an interaction aspect to it, but I don't think it's not hurtful like this.
Mine is also kind of an interaction thing, but it's not like direct.
Yeah, directly just take something away.
This I could see on an action card. An action card, exhaust 2 people's agents or something. So
Right.
something like that. And hey,
that's why I'm saying it could just be an action card, so if you're hurting somebody, you got to like kick them.
Yeah.
future video action cards? I don't know. Just saying.
Speaking of which, I want to talk about my next one.
Okay.
Go for it.
Let's see it. You said this one was a doozy, so I'm looking forward to it.
So this is called Ambition, and it's definitely
Ambitious.
Yeah. I would put it at number 9, and the reason for that is because this is kind of the random-ish card that could end up being stronger than 8, but slightly weaker than 8. I don't think it could be any weaker than about halfway up the lineup because of the way you would tune this.
Okay.
Primary for Ambition. Reveal and resolve the top card of the event deck. Then look at the next card of the event deck.
Okay.
The secondary is spend 1 token from your strategy pool to look at the next card of the event deck.
Okay. I think we definitely have something else to get into here
Yes.
before we can really talk.
This would be another thing in the game. And I want to make sure that if you're doing random events, they have a theme to them. So before I talk about my couple of event card examples that I came up with, events always have to benefit the player who revealed them more than they benefit anybody else. Because the entire reason for taking the Ambition card is that you are the one flipping it. So there's nothing else it does except for let you flip the event.
Right.
So the event has to benefit you more than it benefits other people. And if it is a negative towards other people, it cannot be a negative towards you. This was taken from Spirit Island. And I always liked how events would have this sort of like power level where you always knew the base of what it could be and like kind of the ceiling of what it could be. It didn't necessarily like end your game, but it couldn't necessarily like do nothing either. It had to be within this range of power. And so I wanted to keep it at about the same range of power as if you had taken one of these strategy cards, but you don't know the outcome unless you had spent and followed the secondary, the
previous round
before. Yes.
Okay.
So exploration is another random event that can happen. These events are going to be galaxy-wide. I want them to be game-changing, galaxy-wide, interesting things, kind of like agendas, but not ones that we have control over. Just the person with the ambition card is causing to happen to the galaxy.
Cool.
So my first one is Galactic Crisis. Immediately reveal an agenda. Treat it as if it were the agenda phase, except you decide the outcome as if all players have voted, and no action cards may be played on this agenda.
That's like a top tier one, right? 'Cause
Wow.
That's crazy.
So you pull an agenda, you immediately decide what's going to happen from that agenda. So some agendas may say, like, depending on how many players or whatever, but you get to decide the outcome. You are treated as the speaker, and everybody else may or may not be hurt depending on what the outcome is. So this is kind of like a random inside of a random. Now, the reason why I would want this to be 9 is because these events have a lot to do with the information you receive from the rest of the cards. If you had spent a strategy token on each of these previous ones, and then you are stalling this to the very end, you should have some kind of benefit for using your knowledge of the others. So this would be your benefit of using your knowledge of maybe politics the previous round. There are some events that have to do with what kind of action cards you've received, ones that have to do with using your trade goods, but they never give you things that these cards, secondaries, can already give you. So yes, that was a top tier one. Number 2, the end is near.
Draw a secret objective.
If it causes you to discard a secret objective, each player may convert their commodities to trade goods. So first of all, you draw a secret objective. Now the reason why if this causes you to discard a secret objective is because that means that you have maxed out your hand and it is later in the game.
Yeah.
So everybody getting to convert their commodities to trade goods is because if it's later in the game, if it's in the second half of the game, then people are already stopping trading with each other, and people probably have replenished their commodities using a previous card. So the end is near, they're able to end the game earlier, but you have more options with objectives. So you are able to end the game super early because you have a secret objective, you can get a point out of that. And everybody else can end the game slightly less fast, but still faster because they get a bunch of money out of this. But you can also do the money transfer thing, okay? And there's one more example.
Okay.
Sure.
3 is Ancient Unburial. You gain any technology ignoring all prerequisites. Then the player in last place, you break ties, gains a technology ignoring all prerequisites.
Oh.
Which could be you twice.
Twice, yep.
I mean, these seem kind of cracked, I'm not going to lie.
They
But you
seem
don't know what you're
very
gonna get.
strong.
That's true. I mean, again, this is only 3. Depends on how big the deck is. Also, a stipulation.
I don't think the deck should be that big. I think it should be about the same size as the Relic deck so that it has some kind of consistency.
But you'll need to have some lower power ones in there, right? Just to make sure that it's not okay, every round I take a 9. And is this open after Mechatol is taken, or how does that work exactly? Because if there's one that grabs a law, maybe the law could have, or the agenda, it could have something to do with Mechatol, or maybe it gets unlocked after Mechatol is taken, so you can't just spam it early or whatever.
That'd be interesting to not only can you now do the agenda phase, but you can also choose the 9th strategy card. I would want to say I'd probably not do that though, and just kind of tweak other things to not mess with that, because I'd still want to be able to have that Galactic Crisis vote on an agenda.
That is extremely strong.
But I don't think I'd have very many weak ones, because the entire point is that you don't know what you're going to get. You just know it's going to be just as good as these. So it could be slightly stronger, it could be slightly weaker, but you're hedging on it. And the only way that you know is if you spent tokens or used this card the previous round. The thing is, this doesn't get you points inherently. This will never just get you a point unless it's through something else. like voting on who gets a point on an agenda like that one.
Right.
But this card itself will never just give you a point, and it's after 8. So they should be strong because you're last in speaker order.
I mean, yeah, for balancing wise, I don't think it could go any lower than 8, that's for sure. And you can tune it accordingly and have the amount that you want, and maybe have a lot more that kind of each individually, like you already had one that was about voting, and you had one about technology, even trade goods and stuff, so.
I do like that to get the most out of this, it is helpful to set up for it, to use the secondary of it, to look ahead and kind of try to do that.
Because everything always affects more than one person at the table.
Right.
So if you have used the secondary of it at previous round, you have some kind of idea what's going to happen to the table the next round, if it's chosen again.
Yep. And if it's something that you want to happen to you, you can attempt to take ambition. I do also like the idea that it could be gated after either like
Mechatol.
after Mechatol is
Like a
taken.
custodian's point is taken?
Yeah, just so the beginning of the game is not so chaotic.
Okay.
I think that would actually just be cool in general, right? You could add maybe a couple more, kind of like we were talking about with Twilight Imperium 3rd edition, where there's like alternates of versions where it's like you only get a base set of them, and then once you unlock Mechatol, or maybe hit like a certain point amount or something, then a couple new ones pop up. It's probably a bit complicated, but I feel like it allows you to add more powerful ones that don't affect the game super early as well. Because this would be a good example of that, where it's like, wow, that's really good. I mean, even the first one that kind of started off this whole idea, right? Being able to look at the next objectives, maybe that's locked until the end, although I did like the idea of being able to get it first round. But yeah, I kind of do like that as a balancing factor, right? Just locking it up. And then you can allow it to be a bit more powerful as well.
Yeah, you'd also have to figure out some kind of weird thing about like the extra working within that car. Like there'd be so many balancing things and like playtesting that would have to be done with the event deck. But how would you feel if a galaxy-wide event deck was added to the game? Would that be too much?
I think it would definitely be interesting. I like some of these, but I think if they are going to be event decks, then they have to definitely impact every single player in some way.
Okay.
Even if it's like tiny, like, oh hey, you trade your commodities into trade goods, if that happens. In a different case, if that card is pulled, if they don't have the 3 secret objectives already, then it is literally only draw a secret objective for the person who flipped it. And I don't like that as a galaxy-wide event.
I overall like the idea. In my head, I'm like, yeah, there's always randomness to games, right? I mean, you're rolling dice to try and defeat someone else's fleet. You might just roll terribly.
But here's the thing. If you spend a secondary on the card, the only event that nobody knows what's going to happen is the first one. If you follow the secondary, it's random, but you know what the next rounds could be.
I will say what would feel bad is paying for the secondary, but maybe 2 or 3 people pay for the secondary. I guess they could maybe plan for it because, well, I'm last in line to pick, so I'm not even going to get to, choose it, right? Only one person gets to choose the card for the next round. So there could maybe be some feels bad there where it's like you spent your token and didn't really get a lot. You got information, but is it like super powerful information? Maybe not.
Well, and that's also kind of why I wanted to put it at the last spot, because if you've already spent up your secondary follows with your strategy tokens, you shouldn't really feel bad in missing out on it.
The randomness is fun. It's like gambling. It's like rolling a die. Games have random aspects to it. I'm just wondering if maybe it would be a bit too much to just like have these really big effects that are kind of changing the game and can maybe turn the tides here and there. Maybe it interferes with people who really like the skillful aspect to the game, but I guess just like anything else, people would warm up to it. They'd realize and understand what cards could happen and be pulled from the deck. And again, you are taking your entire turn to just roll the dice and see what you pull. So could be something crazy, could not be.
It was just a crazy harebrained idea I had. I'd love to just try it.
I love it. No, I do overall like the idea.
I'd love to just like try it, homebrew it, and see what happens.
I think it is very cool. I think you said it earlier where if this is going to be implemented in the game, it needs to be highly tuned and highly play tested and kind of trying to figure out what the differential is for the person who flips the event versus everyone else at the table.
Right. I think it's a great time to move into your last one.
Oh yeah, that's right. I still have one. Well, it's definitely not as flashy as that, although I mentioned a little bit earlier that it's kind of more related to interaction, and it's something that we haven't talked about. It's interacting with pieces we haven't talked about yet. They're currently in the game. Blackmail. I put it at number 3. So, I don't know, maybe you're already getting an idea.
Okay.
Primary. Force a player to give you a promissory note. You may activate the secondary of this card without paying the trade good cost. Well, what's the secondary? Spend 1 trade good to trade with anyone, regardless if they are your neighbor or not. So normally during the game, obviously you're restricted, but maybe you need to make a trade with someone really bad. You can do it right then and there. We're always playing in a group with friends, so we're always kind of making a lot of verbal agreements. But promissory notes are important, especially at, I guess, high level of play, or when you're being really serious and it's like the only way to make sure you're going to get something. And I do kind of like the ones where like the riders, someone has to give you a promissory note. I just like the idea of like, well, we're not interacting with these a lot. So
Can I tweak it a little bit?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So what if it was exactly how it is, except the secondary, 2 changes to the secondary?
Okay.
Because I don't think the primary is quite strong enough. So 2 changes to the secondary. One is that it could be a commodity or a trade good. And
Okay,
number
yeah.
2 is instead of spend one of those things to do a transaction, it is give one of those things to the player who performed the primary ability to perform a transaction.
Oh, okay. I like that.
That
Yeah,
is
it
very
definitely buffs up the primary, because in the primary, like you said, someone could just hand you the worst one they have, which, yeah, probably feels bad. I just didn't want to be like, you get to pick, because that just seemed way, way too good.
If you got to pick, but there was a stipulation that it could not be support for the throne, how do you think that would go?
Well, the political one is only good if it's really good. Like, it either doesn't matter if they can't cast votes, or it matters because they're going to win the game.
It hinges very much on the agenda.
I think
that's
you
being
either
voted
take
on.
ceasefire or you take the alliance.
Right.
Because you want an extra ability. What if it's like...
What about
No,
like
'cause you could
faction
just-
tech? What if it focused on being like, you can take their faction tech, like no matter what, if they happen to have it. If not, then you can choose between a couple of them. Or they
faction
can just-
tech.
The faction
Or
promissory
faction
note.
promissory note, my bad, yeah.
Oh, okay.
Because some faction promissory notes are really strong, and those are really big bargaining tools. So just being like, I'm going to take that, but maybe that's a bit too
Some
much
faction...
interaction.
No, actually, that's
That is
interesting.
very, yeah.
That's interesting because some faction promissory notes are never given out because they're only detrimental to the faction.
So that's a good way of kind of hurting someone, you know.
You could also, like, demand research agreement from Jolnar.
Or Terraform from Titans, where you can just make one of your planets better.
I kind of like that. I thought maybe it would be a bit too strong because we're talking low numbers. I don't think this would need to be anything higher. I think lower makes a bit more sense because there is still some variation to it. Depends on who's in your game. But I just like the idea of doing more promissory notes. Maybe we just don't do enough in our games personally. I know in other games, people do it all the time. They're very important. But it's not something that's touched on really with a lot of these cards. Some of the like things that you vote on and action cards maybe revolve around them a little bit, but I thought it was a cool bit of interaction. And then the trade was interesting too. How do you guys feel about that? Being able to trade even though you're not next to people. Maybe not super relevant.
Maybe not as relevant because you end up being neighbors with most people, and people are usually able to just float things. Like, hey, I want to trade with this person. Would you mind passing it along? I think early in the game is where you're going to want commodities and or trade goods from people anyway.
It's not terrible to have a secondary that's maybe not always chosen, right? I mean, there's going to be some instances where it's like, I actually really need to trade with someone, so maybe 1 or 2 people use it. I mean, there's a lot like, Imperial, maybe sometimes you're just like, you already got your secret objective, so you have no point to do the secondary of it. You have no interest in teching up, so you can just save your resources. But anyone that needs it, it's there. And early game, I think it's really, really good.
It also doesn't spend a command token.
True.
Right. I don't think that people should have to pay anything. Allow the player with the primary to gain a trade good from the supply to perform a transaction with any player. That's why it's not costing you anything. All it's costing you is boosting the person who did it.
Yeah, that would probably be more fair. Only because when I was thinking of it, I was like, this is not worth a command token. And I was like, what's like the cheapest thing I can make this? I was like, and even making like influence or something is like, well, maybe you have to exhaust a whole planet.
Right,
because
you
that's not
want to make people pay to do what they're already going to pay for.
Yeah, right. Because your transaction could be doing that. So I think allowing them to take one from the supply would just be like, I'm benefiting them, but I'm still getting to do what I want, and there's no downside. Or maybe you even have the option to be like, and you can choose any person to do it, but maybe just taking it from the supply makes the most sense to differentiate it as well from like trade a little bit.
Yeah, I think it's definitely one of the more underpowered cards that we've talked about.
Well, cards that accelerate the game, cards that help people trade. These are both ways that we can make the game faster. I feel like if we are going to add more cards, they probably should be helpful to accelerating the game.
Right, because the
And
more you
bringing it
add,
to the end.
if you don't do that, the longer the game's going to go anyway, because there's more options,
Right.
more decision making that needs to happen, more stuff that's happening. If there's an event deck, how long does that add to the game? Who knows?
We definitely would not add all 6 of these.
No, for sure.
Maybe we should make like a homebrew like new variant of every strategy card and see how it goes.
Well, we already got Warfare done.
I really appreciate you all watching. Thank you very much. Leave any ideas you have for other strategy cards in the description down below.
And let us know what you guys thought of ours. Were they good, bad? What would you do to those?
There's got to be at least one of those that suck and one of those that you guys would absolutely love to help homebrew. Any other homebrew ideas that you have that you'd like to see us work on, please also let us know in the comment section down below. If you haven't subscribed to the Cardboard Crash Course Twilight Imperium channel, here's your chance right now before you click off this video. Have a great rest of your day. Pax Magnifica, Bellum Gloriosum.
Honestly,
It's fun to talk about, though.
I'm